Good evening and welcome to All Four Wins Football. We're back for another lower league lingo. We are right on the business end of the season. We have got some bits and pieces to talk about. We're going to tell you who the runners and the riders are. The Grand National may be over, but this certainly is not. There are some really tasty things to go. We're going to be looking at that, the other side of this, and discussing everything that's going on with this WNL proposal, which could be good, could be bad, depends on your point of view. Let's find out after this. Yes, good evening. Lovely to have you with us. We've got, like I say, lots to talk about today. We are going to talk about these WNL proposals, which we will look at the latter end of this discussion. And we've also got Stu Barker from Sin 71 on this evening as well. He's just fueling up as we speak. Not at Tesco's. He's not queuing up for the gold dust that is petrol. No, he's getting some dinner. So he will be with us very shortly. To do his bit, but for now we've got me, we've got Gareth, and Gareth, it's lovely to have you here with us. It feels like ages since we've been on a podcast together. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It does. It feels like forever. I think I went ages without missing anything, and then suddenly things happen. Football matches to be played, parents to be visited, and all of that within the same sort of chunk of time. But no, here today, purely because our midweek game this week is tomorrow. So yeah, if Blackburn could have got Clitheroe as a venue today, I probably wouldn't be here again. But I am. And it's good to be back. And yeah, some interesting things to chat about.
There are some interesting things to chat about. So basically, rather than doing what we normally do, we run through all of the leagues, run through every match that's happened and talk about the positions. We're literally just concentrating on the top and the bottom, which sides can possibly make it out and which sides possibly can't. Now, the WNL proposals that we are going to be looking at obviously outline what the 27-28 season might look like. We're not at that yet. So what we thought would be a good foundation is to look at where we are now. So what we know, obviously, is that the WSL is going to increase to 14 teams. There will be no automatic relegation, and the team that finishes bottom will play off against the team that finishes third in the WSL2, and that side, if they win, will obviously replace the WSL side. So that is what caused everything else to change this season, including the proposals that were initially thought up, and then needed to rethink them and gave them a good out after the conversation about all of the PGA clubs potentially coming over and the B teams and all of that jazz. So that's what's happening in the WSL. WSL2, as a result, two sides will be automatically promoted to help get them up to 14 teams. And again, as you say, the team that finishes third will play off for the switch. Only one side will be relegated, and that will be either to the north or the south, depending on where they are. It's currently Pompey that are at the bottom of that division, so that's Portsmouth, and they are struggling a little bit, but Ipswich are just above them. You kind of feel they'd probably both be southern. Ipswich potentially could end up in the north, but you would think they would end up in the southern. But just above them, you've got Durham and Sheffield United, both of whom can still be relegated. So that is a very interesting one there. Gareth, I'll bring you in immediately on that one. It's a bit strange, isn't it, with them just relegating the one? Obviously, it means they then have to start shifting teams around rather than putting one in the north, one in the south. That's the big thing, I suppose, about the WNL. There's lots of switching about. Out of those four teams, I don't want to say any preference, because that seems like the wrong word entirely, but who do you think is most likely to drop down? You've got Sheffield United on 18 points, Durham on 16 points, Ipswich and Portsmouth both on 14, but Ipswich and Sheffield United have 3 games to play. Durham and Pompey only have 2. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's I think it is really anybody's call. I think the Sheffield United, I imagine they're probably okay on their 18 points. They've had a couple of good results recently. You know, they've picked up a couple of draws and a win in their last 5 games. I think, yeah, Portsmouth, obviously with their 2 games to go, they play Palace and Forest. So comfortable side. So, you know, teams that are pretty comfortable. Palace, you know, towards the top end. So really, you imagine that Pompey would be looking to get something out of Forest. Ipswich, you know, they have Sheffield United, Birmingham City, and Sunderland. So you imagine really they've got to try and get something out of the game against Sheffield United, because of the kind of way that the table's at the moment. You know, Ipswich are absolutely smashing it. Birmingham City are absolutely smashing it towards the top end. Sunderland, you know, they could pick up something there. You imagine that could be a game where they would want to do that as well. Durham plays Sheffield United. You imagine that would be a game that they would be looking at to get points from as well. But then their final game this season is Newcastle. That's a derby game. You know, anything can happen in derby games. It probably isn't really a derby for probably one of those one-sided derbies, I imagine, where Newcastle fans aren't that bothered about Durham being, you know, a club that is an independent women's club. Really, I don't know if they have a men's team, but I don't think they do. But geographically, it's a derby, and that will mean a lot to the Durham fans and players. I think those games for Sheffield United are going to be crucial. But I think if you look at those fixtures and who has the most chance to get points, Pompey are the ones that you look at and go, they've probably got 2 games where you think they would be fortunate to get something from them. Whereas the other 3 teams, you're all looking at them, well, they've all got to play each other really at some point. So you look at them and go, yeah, there's games where they can get a point at least, or maybe even 3. So yeah, I think Portsmouth probably will be the ones to drop down, which will then mean that there will, you know, who knows really what the way the playoffs go in the FA WNL, but it could very much mean that there's going to be some lateral movement, because, you know, we don't really ever know who is going to get moved where when it comes to geography. However, I think the safe thing to say is that if Portsmouth were to be relegated, they would not be put in the WNL North.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at with that one. There was just no chance that if Portsmouth ever end up in the WNL North, something's gone incredibly wrong on the south coast of England. That is for sure. So there you go. That is what is happening in the WSL2. And that, of course, means that 3 clubs are guaranteed to leave WSL2, which means you need to have 3 to replace them. And they will come exclusively from Tier 3, the WNL North and South. So what will happen? Obviously, the first 2 teams in the North and South will be automatically promoted. The 2 runners-up from both divisions will then play off, and whoever wins that will be the 3rd team to be promoted. There are also, of course, 2 teams relegated from each of the 2 divisions, given a total of 7 teams that will be out of the 2 divisions in the North and South. So we'll start with the North because there's a lot going on there, Gareth. It's by no means all over there. It is going to be an incredibly exciting time. There's only 1 game left. It all happens on the 26th of April. So not this weekend, weekend after. County Cup finals and things going on this week. Next week, the big one. And it is a big one, really, because Burnley are currently top of the division with 59 points, and they must play Stoke in their final game of the season. They are currently 4th. Wolves, on 58 points, have got to play Halifax, who are currently 10th. Now, you might sit there and think the Wolves have definitely got the easiest one. Halifax are 10th, so they're unlikely to get the points. Burnley could potentially lose to Stoke or drop a point. Even if they draw and Wolves win, Wolves go top. But that does a disservice to the relegation picture, because although Sporting Calcer are out of the picture and are gone, they are one of the teams that will be relegated. There's 3 other teams that are still up for relegation. You've got Hull on 19 points, Halifax on 16 points, just above the dotted line, and just below them, Loughborough Lightning. Now, Hull have got to travel to Rugby, another side that's been doing incredibly well. So you would imagine, even if they lose, their goal difference is the worst of the three, but it would require both Halifax and Loughborough Lightning to win in order to drop them down. But Halifax, as we say, got to go and travel to Wolves. Loughborough Lightning have to face Sporting Chalsa at home. Now, again, you might sit there and think, well, Sporting Chalsa are down. Loughborough are likely to win that, but they lost the reverse fixture 1-0 at Chalsa. So, lots happening in that division, Gareth. One that I know that you are very au fait with. Just tell us a little bit about how that looks, because I'm not sure I can call it. Like, every time I sit there and think, oh, Burnley are going to win it, I can come up with a reason why Wolves are going to win it. And every time I think Wolves are going to win it, vice versa for Burnley.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you look at Burnley, they've played 21 games, they've won 19 of them, drawn 2. Those 2 draws, Wolves, Halifax. So Halifax have history this season of taking points away from title contenders. Wolves this season have played 21, drawn 1, Burnley, lost 1, Burnley. So, Halifax have gone. They are the only side, not Wolves or Burnley, to take points off the top 2 sides. So they have form. Could they do it again? You imagine a point could well be enough to keep them up. But who knows? Stoke, they are about as they are fourth. I think they are a strong mid-table side. They're 7 points adrift of Rugby, and they are 25 points adrift of Wolves. So they are a long way away from that title fight. But you would be looking at it as a Wolves fan or a Wolves kind of player and thinking that they could take points away from Burnley. So I don't want to call it. Let's toss a coin and see how that goes for that title fight. The relegation fight, I imagine Hull are probably okay, even though they did get an absolute hiding off Burnley 7-0 last week, which didn't do the goal difference any good. I imagine that now they are okay. I think Loughborough have got to fancy at least getting themselves a point. I think if you were to look at it and have to make a decision, I think Loughborough might do it. And I think that purely because I think they're just more likely to scrape a draw from somewhere than Halifax are. Although, when backs are against the wall, when, ultimately both of those sides are going to be absolutely going for it. Are Halifax going to sit back and just try and take a draw? No, I can't see it happening. Wolves are going to be absolutely going for it as well. They're going to want to try and win. They have the better goal difference than Burnley at the moment. So, a draw may be enough for them, but they're going to be going to win. And I think when teams are attacking, it can create opportunities to create something on the counter. Who knows? I mean, both at the top and the bottom, you could absolutely just toss a coin and make a call there. We know Chalsa are down. It's then either Loughborough or Halifax, and I don't know how that's going to go. I think it could be either or. Halifax were given a reprieve last year. I felt pretty confident this time last year that they would be a tier 4 club. They've come out, they've got some fantastic results so far this season. They've got a chance of staying up on that final day, and if they do, it'll be absolutely testament to the stuff that they have done. Moving Rob into that full-time role over there. They are looking to make moves. It's a tricky area there with sort of Leeds and Huddersfield nearby, bigger clubs, bigger names. If they can stay up, they can absolutely look to kick on next season. Loughborough, obviously, the Midlands is a really congested area as well. But yeah, either way, I think we've definitely got some stories to pay attention to in a couple of weeks.
Do you think there's also a little bit, I mean, I don't know, I could be entirely wrong here, but if with social media being about now, you'd imagine the fans will be on X trying to check what the Burnley score is against Stoke. And if it's a tight game between Wolves and Halifax, and it sort of filters through, as it sometimes can do to the players on the pitch, Burnley are 2 or 3 up, there's 15 minutes left. Do you think there's any possibility whatsoever that at, say, 0-0, Wolves just don't bother, because that's the wrong word entirely, but just they understand that they can't win now. They know that they're guaranteed the playoff position, so that's not an issue. Is that the moment when Halifax, who are still sort of sat there knowing they've got to fight for their lives, is that a potential chance to strike for them, or have I really overthought that?
I think I think that they would just try and keep focus on themselves, not bother about what Burnley are doing as much as possible. I think there may be kind of word that gets in or whatever, but I think ultimately they're just going to try and zone out as much of the noise as possible. They've got a job to do. If Burnley are falling up at half time and you kind of get word of it in the changing room, then possibly that can have some kind of unconscious mental impact. But as much as possible, I think they're just going to focus on themselves and getting the job done. I think, we've played Wolves this season, and from what I understand from things that Nick have said and from things I've seen as well, they're a super professional outfit. They're just going to be tunnel vision. We need to win. Let's go and do that. Let's worry about ourselves, and we'll see where things are. In the 90th minute as things are happening.
Fair enough. So like we say, one of those two teams is going to move up into the WSL2. One of those two teams is going to go into the playoff, and they will be facing, for definite, Plymouth from the Southern Division. They have been confirmed as the runners-up. So, that could be a very interesting game. I feel like, I do kind of feel like, whoever it is, Burnley or Wolves, I've just got a sneaking feeling they might end up beating Plymouth. Maybe I'm a bit wrong there. I don't know. I just feel like, that it could still be written on the wall for them. But
there is still an outside chance that Bournemouth get that playoff spot as well, though. So, Bournemouth, they're 6 points off behind Plymouth at the moment, but they've still got 2 games to play.
Very good point.
Granted, one of those is against Watford, but Bournemouth play. They play this weekend. Yes, they play Lewis away this weekend. So, if they go into this game this weekend, their goal difference is worse. They would need a 6-goal swing on goal difference, and would need Plymouth to lose against Real Bedford on the final day whilst they beat Watford. So I think it is more than likely going to be Plymouth, but there is still an outside chance that Bournemouth can do it. Real Bedford have shown they can beat teams towards that top end. They beat Bournemouth last weekend. So, it can be done. Stranger things have happened. But yes, I think it is likely to be Plymouth in that playoff spot. And I think I would back the Northern side to win that playoff. I think the two of them have had a much more comfortable season. They've known pretty much for months, haven't they, really, that if they didn't win a title, they would be in the playoffs. Whereas it has been a much more fiercely contested race for the 3 positions in the Southern Premier. So, but then Plymouth know they're not going to win the league this weekend. So Plymouth go into this weekend, and Bournemouth as well, go into next weekend knowing that the playoff is the best they can achieve. But Plymouth may even go into it knowing it's secure. If Lewis get a result this weekend, then that secures it for Plymouth. They go into that knowing that playoffs is what it is. They don't have to overcome the disappointment of not winning the league. I think mentally that could be really tricky for Wolves or Burnley. I think it's tough, isn't it, when you go through a disappointment of essentially losing a cup final. That's what this weekend is for them. It's 2 cup finals. It can take a while to bounce back. They are both professional outfits and should be able to do it pretty quickly. But there is that mental side as well. Is you've got to pick yourself up after losing a league battle. and go again the following weekend. Whereas Plymouth, they know what the job is. They know that, a one-off game against either Wolves or Burnley, and then that's it. They're in the Championship. So, yeah, I think you can make an argument for whichever side. Although I tend to agree. I think Wolves or Burnley probably have enough to get the job done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Missed that. So they had 2 games to play, not the one. So that did ruin that. But what was confirmed was Watford making it up to the WSL2. They are the champions and will be returning back to what we affectionately call the Championship. But relegation-wise, it's not looking as quite as clear-cut because Billericay Town are gone. They're out. We know that. They have not registered a single point. And I think at the last look, we're about negative 137 in terms of goal difference, which is wild. That's making MK Dons look like a superbly tightly run outfit defensively last season, which I was not sure I would be seeing. However, nonetheless, Billericay will be gone. Now, hashtag United are not out of the woods. Neither are Gwalior, Wimbledon, or Cheltenham. Cheltenham are just below the line, and there is a point that separates those teams. Hashtag on 22, Gwalior on 22, Wimbledon on 21, and Cheltenham also on 21. So what effect is that going to have? Well, hashtag and Wimbledon play each other, which is never ideal when it's the last game of the season, but it does mean it's in their hands. Hashtag will be at home, Wimbledon obviously away. Gwalior have got to travel to Exeter, a side who are perfectly safe and have really nothing to play for other than pride and position. So you might think to yourself, well, that's all fine though, Barry. At the end of the day, those clubs all above the dotted line, apart from the news that Cheltenham will face Billericay Town away from home. Remember, the side that's not got very many goals, concedes a lot, and hasn't got any points yet. Now, it could be that Billericay go all out and really do well in the hope that they can try and register that first point so they don't go down for a duck. But it could also be that Cheltenham absolutely wallop them and get the 3 points that are required. And it also matters because the goal difference between Gwalior, Wimbledon and Cheltenham is incredibly tight. So hashtag are on -4, probably going to be safe. Gwalior, -17. Wimbledon, -18. Cheltenham, -20. So it's literally one of those where for Cheltenham, even a 2-0 win, while a Wimbledon or a Gwalior lose, could be enough to swing it depending on goals scored. It's a wild one. If Cheltenham go off and score a hatful, 6 or 7, then you're in a real problem there because poor old Gwalior and Wimbledon would not be able to match that. So even a win for Cheltenham and a win for Wimbledon, you would imagine that Wimbledon would probably only win it by 1 or 2 goals. So again, if Cheltenham have got a really good goal difference win over Billericay, they could still jump above them just based on that. So yeah, lots happening in the Southern Division and something that will definitely be worth keeping an eye on for those last couple of games. So that's how the WNL North and South is currently stood. Now, as I said, 7 clubs will be leaving the WNL North and South this season. Teams, as I say, that are finishing first, the winner of the playoff, and the 4 teams that are being relegated. So how are we going to make those back up, those 7 teams? Well, the teams that finish top in Division 1, North, Midlands, South West and South East will be promoted. And then there's a playoff between the North and the Midlands and the South West and the South East. And the 2 winners of those games will also be promoted. Obviously, the 7th side is the side that is relegated from the Championship. So that's how those clubs will reconstitute the WNL. So we're still going to have 14 teams at the top, 12 in the Championship, 12 in the WNL North and South, and then 12 in the remaining Division 1 leagues. Not a huge amount to run through on those divisions, but we will do so nonetheless because there are a couple of outstanding points. So again, if we just pop to the Division 1 North with Gareth here, there's still a lot to play for in all of those. The title is not decided. Huddersfield are on 45 points, Leeds on 44 and Cheadle on 43. Leeds have only got 1 game to play, but Huddersfield and Cheadle have got 3. And obviously, that's still a position where the playoff and the title is still yet to be confirmed. You would think, just based on the number of games left to play, that it's going to be between Huddersfield and Cheadle, with one of those teams finishing as the playoff people and Leeds just missing out. But you just never know how things are going to work. In the relegation battle, Blackburn are pretty much out of it. They're all but gone. It's a goal difference thing, and they're on -50. So it would take a big old swing and 2 wins for Blackburn to get them out of trouble. But between the remaining 3, York, Chester the Street, and Doncaster Rover Bells, just 3 points between them, and there's 2 or 3 games left to go. So Gareth, I'll throw it over to you. Division 1 North, who've been really looking at this division a lot over this season. There's been a lot of excitement, and it's taken it again right the way to the end.
Yes. So there's a range of midweek games tomorrow night. So Blackburn will be relegated tomorrow. Anything but a win against Wythenshawe, and they are mathematically relegated. There is a local derby, Durham against Chester Street. So they play tomorrow night. Chester Street can get a result from that. That can move them 3 points clear of Doncaster. With a better goal difference, you imagine then going into the final 2 games of the season would put them in good stead, and surely play Cheadle. So Cheadle can actually go top tomorrow night with a win. The big thing, I think, will be on Sunday. Huddersfield host Cheadle on Sunday, and I suspect that whoever comes out on top in that is going to absolutely be the favourite for the title. York play Huddersfield then midweek. I back Huddersfield to get a win there, which would mean we'd go into the final game of the season with Huddersfield playing Wythenshawe and Cheadle travelling up to Durham. Now, Durham have had some fantastic results this season, so they are 2 fixtures which by no means are the outcomes secure. So yeah, really, really all to play for. Final game of the season as well, for kind of fulfillness. Leeds play Stockport County. Stockport County, who have not yet won a game, as far as I'm aware, since they've made their big announcements about all of the changes coming in for next season. Unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't think I have. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to Sunday, because if Huddersfield beat Cheadle, regardless of what happens tomorrow night, they will either be, 2 points clear again, or they will be, if Cheadle don't get a win tomorrow, they will be 4 points clear, I think, essentially. So that's a huge game on Sunday. I think all eyes are going to be there. I think whoever ends up winning that game will potentially go on to win the title. And then, I think they will be the 2 sides that end up in the playoffs. I think Leeds losing against Norton this past Sunday at Ellen Road has probably put their backs up against the wall. I think if they'd won that game, they'd have been, top of the league at the moment. They would have been, I'd felt confident saying they'll get a playoff spot. But now I think likely to be Cheadle or Huddersfield that end up taking both the title, and then whoever doesn't get it gets the playoff spot. Down the bottom, yeah, right. I think Blackburn are done. They have to beat Wythenshawe, and then they would have to beat who they play on the final day, York on the final day. Which, if they can go into that needing with a realistic chance of staying up, then who knows? But I don't think they're going to have that. Their goal difference is 39 goals worse off than Chester the Streets at the moment. So it would require a massive swing, which I just can't see happening. And yeah, I think, if their relegation isn't confirmed tomorrow night, it probably will be in just over a week's time. And then, Chester Street, if they play Durham and get a result from that, then that puts them in a good position. York have, like I say, they've got Blackburn in the final game of the season. They'll back themselves to get something from that, which means Doncaster's final 2 games Chester Street on Sunday, huge. And then they play Norton and Stockton on the final game of the season. I think I backed Norton and Stockton to get a win there. So yeah, Sunday, massive weekend. You've got potentially title deciding fixture, and then you've got 10th versus 11th as well. If Chester Street win that game, and York, even if York don't win at the weekend, that would have Doncaster 3 points adrift of York, with better goal difference, but it would require Blackburn to beat York. And I think if you look at it coming into the season, who do you back to get a result? Do you back Doncaster to get a result against Norton, or do you back York to get a result against Blackburn? I think it might be a tough ask for Doncaster, but strange things have happened. They're difficult to break down. They're a tall side, strong defensively. They absolutely can do it, but I think time may well be running out if they don't get a result this weekend. This weekend is massive in the WNL Division 1 North.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And a really interesting point to make out here is that obviously out of the 4 divisions, there are going to be 14 teams that will be leaving the division. That will be constituted again by having 4 coming down, obviously, from Tier 3. 8 will come up from the regional divisions, which is each of the winners, plus 2 more from the points per game. Now, we're not going to go massively into Tier 5, but I think it's, as we've got a northern representative here, definitely worth looking at this one, because from the northwest, we know that Fylde are going to be coming up, AFC Fylde, and from the northeast, it could be Bradford still, could be Thornaby. It's between those 2. But just a quick one with you there, because I know that you're quite au fait with AFC Fylde, having been up against them in recent memory. But 3 names that I think would be a good addition, whichever 2 you choose, in order to help recreate the WNL Division 1 North.
Yeah, listen, I think Fylde are a fantastic side. They've got a really strong kind of core group of players, young group of players. And yeah, I think they will come up and they will be competitive and they will cause teams issues. I think they're going to be really well placed. And I think whoever comes up from the northeast, I think Bradford likely are also a strong side. I don't know too much about them. I imagine they may be sort of slightly less competitive than Fylde, but still, I think if you look at this league, it's super competitive every year, top and bottom. Who knows? Next season, it's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. fully agree on that one. So that's whereabouts we are. We are going to jump into the Midlands. Stu has made it. We're just going to add him into the chat. Hello, Stu. How are you doing, sir?
Very, very well. Thank you very much. Just a normal eventful night in a house with 2 children and a wedding weeks away.
Gotta love these things. But there we go. It's nice to be busy, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to be anything else other than busy.
But yes, we've gone through all of the divisions. We're literally just running through the state of play in the divisions as it stands. And
brilliant. So I've missed the plate final, and awesome, cool.
Oh, we haven't even no time to talk about such things.
Shame.
Another one. Unable to have such conversations right now. We have made it up to the Midlands is where we are, and obviously with no John and no Nick, this will be a very short segment indeed. Suffice it to say that the side that will be promoted from the Midlands, because they have been, and congratulations to them, is Peterborough United. They have successfully got that promotion into Tier 3. In terms of the playoffs, it could be Leafield, it could be Boldmere. They will both have to continue playing in their last game of the season. And obviously Leafield 1 point clear of Boldmere, so it could be either of those 2. Relegation-wise, very interesting. Lincoln United are gone. Kidderminster Harriers are 3 points clear of Stourbridge. It will be one of those two teams that goes from the final game. Kidderminster will be playing Sutton Coldfield away from home. Stourbridge needs to play the new champions, Peterborough United. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to what might happen there. With regards,
are we just skirting over the Boldmere Leafield rivalry now?
Yeah. For today,
probably safer.
Scooching past, just no beef required at this point. But whichever side wins it will be very good for them. And looking at the Midlands in terms of Tier 6, ones that will help to reconstitute the Division 1 Midlands, we know that Chesterfield are the side that will come up from the East Midlands. Anything could happen in the West Midlands. Absolutely anything. There's 4 teams. It could be Lye, it could be Redditch Borough, it could be Shifnal Town, it could be Shrewsbury, because top of the table is Lye, having played 20 games of the possible 22. However, Redditch Borough have only played 16, and Shifnal and Shrewsbury are on 13. So how they're going to get all of those games played, I've got no idea. They could still be playing in June at this rate. That is absolutely wild. So that's the West Midlands and the East Midlands. Anywho. Right, we will drop down to the Southeast, and the Southeast is an incredibly simple discussion. Welcome back.
Sorry, apologies.
The Southeast is an incredibly simple discussion to have because it's all sorted. There is nothing else to worry about. Fulham crowned the champions of the Division 1 Southeast. Incredibly well deserved. They've had a superb campaign and have played incredibly well, lifting the trophy at Craven Cottage, which was great news for them. It will be Norwich that make it into the playoffs. They will obviously be playing the team that finishes second in the Southwest. We'll be talking to Stu exclusively about that in just a moment. But yes, those are the 2 teams that will be coming up from the Southeast. The 2 teams that will be dropping down, that's been the case for some time now, AFC Sudbury and Cheshire United. They will both be dropping into Tier 5. And in terms of teams coming up into the Division 1 Southeast, we have got Saltdean, Brentford and Dartford, who are battling it out in the London and Southeast. It could be any one of those 3 that makes it to the top. But I am delighted to finally be able to confirm on this show that there will be a team coming into the WNL, and it is the almighty Stevenage FC. It's been a long old road. Done absolutely superb. Sarah Wiltshire got her 50th goal of the season this weekend in the County Cup final. It's been a double winning season so far. Still a League Cup final to go, but Stevenage had an excellent season and will be a WNL club next season. And that takes us to the Division 1 Southwest, where it is all kicking off. We know that Portishead and Worthing are going to be the 2 teams that drop down, Stu. We also know that between Moneyfields and Swindon, one of them will go up automatically. One of them will need to go and face Norwich. Now, Moneyfields, that's your side, currently sat top of the table, 58 points. Swindon, second of the table, 57 points. Both got a game left to play. And in true Rocky fashion, it's going to be against each other. Moneyfields with a slight advantage because they've got the home leg in that respect. But an incredibly big game. How do you see it going? You've watched the whole season from the Moneyfields perspective. Swindon have done incredibly well this season. Moneyfields have as well. First question, how do you think it's going to end up? And secondly, how do you think the runner-up is likely to fare in the game against Norwich?
It's very difficult to say because I wear different hats. Obviously, for those that might not know, as well as running the Since 71 women's football blog, I also have a role with Moneyfields working in their media and communications team. Moneyfields is a lovely little club that we didn't tell you what league we were in, you probably wouldn't have any idea where in the world we were. But based in Portsmouth, we have to compete with Pompey for a lot of the attention, but we like that plucky underdog status, which is part of the reason why it's a tricky scenario to be in, being that we have the luxury of being able to win the league promotion by virtue of a draw. The maths are very simple for Swindon. They have to win. We've got a plus goal difference of 5, but that doesn't really matter ultimately now. It's win, lose or draw. And if we do the first two, if we win or draw, then we go up. If we lose, then we don't go up automatically, and then it would fall to Swindon. What will happen? Absolutely, goodness knows. We've both been competing now for the last few seasons. We had a little spell where I think we won the first 3 games, or we had the upper hand then. But then over the last 3 matches, I think Swindon. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Swindon have come out on top. I know that when they came to the John Jenkins Stadium, the final game of last season, they won that match 4-2, and they obviously won the game at the county ground this year. It was a 2-0 win to them. We feel that we kind of handed it to them a little bit, that match, but ultimately they won't give monkeys if how the win comes about. They got that win, and do you know what? I think the only way to describe it is cup final. It literally is a cup final. It's a one-off game. Winner takes it all, and it could go either way on the day. Ultimately, if I was trying to be impartial, I'd say maybe we are ever so slight favourites based on the league table. But Annie Colston's brilliant. Annie Colston, I want to see playing in Tier 2, to be honest, and see what she can do there, because I think she could the way that she's taken to the 4th tier makes me think that she'd be easily at home in the 3rd tier. So then why not give her a push there? So when you've got someone that can score as many goals as her, you've always got to be worried ultimately. But then we also have Shannon Albury, who's only a couple of goals behind in the league. So do you know what? It's impossible, as you can probably tell by my flip-flopping and not wanting to commit. And ultimately, first and foremost, I'm involved with Moneyfields because I'm a fan of the club. I used to have a season ticket at Old Trafford, but I couldn't give a monkeys how Manchester United get on. As long as my Moneyfields team win at the weekend, not that bothered. It served me quite well as a Man United fan, having Moneyfields over the last 4 or 5 years, because it's certainly distracted from and made me enjoy. What's the cliche? It's made me fall in love with football again, a little bit, but. It could go either way. I think the playoff match for the loser with Norwich will be very, very similar. Very similar. I think all 3 teams are relatively evenly matched on the pitch. I think off the pitch, the resources afforded to Norwich certainly outweigh what we have at Moneyfields. I can't comment too much on how things are going with Swindon. They've had a couple of good FA Cup runs over the last few years, so they, unless they're putting it all in Annie Colston's goal bonus, they should still have a little bit knocking around there. So from a resources perspective, maybe they can look to add to the budget and compete if they get promoted. Yeah, you can tell I'm a little bit apprehensive about it all and not really wanting to say too much or too little. Because also, as I say, I'm a fan and I have that hope, and I don't want to hope too much and have everything dashed. I joked when I first came on about the National League plate. I felt that we were slight favourites going into the game against Cheadle, and Cheadle did well. I think we deserved to win it over the 120 minutes, but we didn't score a goal in the 120 minutes, and we didn't score a goal in the penalty shootout, and they scored 3 goals in the penalty shootout, so we lost. So football can be a cruel game, but it's going to be really exciting. As a neutral, come on down to John Jenkins. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be, hopefully it's a strong referee, because I think it's going to be ferociously fought between both clubs. We know that Swindon can be quite a vocal club, wanting to sort of influence a referee, but probably what club doesn't. So I don't say that as a criticism, but there's going to be a lot on the line. So hopefully it's a good game that's settled without controversy. But hopefully it's Moneyfields. I'll take a controversial last-minute penalty to win the game. I don't know. I'm probably useless for answering these questions, so I'll apologise for that. But it's going to be brilliant. It could go either way. I wouldn't bother placing a bet on it if you're that way inclined, because how many cup finals have we seen?
I think you answered it brilliantly, because you answered it with the heart of a football fan. I genuinely think if I was in that situation, I mean, you talk about cup finals. We went into the county cup final this weekend with Stevenage, and even though we were playing Harpenden, who are a side that in the league have not performed that well, in the cups they've been superb. They've made both cup finals, which we'll be playing them in both of, and it really does catch you, because all throughout that game you're watching it, but at the same point it's a one-off game. Absolutely anything can happen at that point, and it's going to be just incredible. And you do have the advantage, because a draw is obviously absolutely fine for you, not so great for them. So listen, good luck, whatever happens there. And looking at the teams that could be coming up will be very interesting indeed, because it looks like it will be Wickham from the Southern. Looks like it should be. Winchester City Flyers and AFC Portchester can both get there as it stands, but they can only get 1 point clear of Wickham. So if Wickham get a win in one of their final few games, they will be the champions of the Southern Regional League. And in terms of the Southwest, again, could be Torquay, could be Sherborne, could be Forest Green Rovers. But any names there that stand out for you in terms of being a side you'd expect to see playing in the WNL again?
If I can just go back to the Southern Region Division, that is a really, really good one. I know we spoke about it probably nearly 2 months now, given the time that's gone on. And it was just kind of starting to bubble over. AFC Portchester have had another club that have had a couple of good FA Cup runs, and it just goes to show how important it is for clubs at that level, because they've been able to invest really heavily in quality, experienced players, and good young players too. So they have set themselves up to win that division. Anything other than, they will say privately, well, we're just going to compete and we're going to see what we can do. But the players they've brought in, it's not win or bust, but anything other than a league win should be a disappointment for them, given the absolute level of quality they've got in. They've got so many National League players within that team. They've got two fantastic midfielders in Gemma Hillier, and they've got three former AFC Bournemouth midfielders that would still be sort of able to compete within their squad, should they have chosen to remain within there. But they've obviously opted to prioritise game time and for want of a better word, enjoyment. But they're a very strong side. They had a lot of games in hand because of their cup runs, but they have had a difficult couple of weeks where they've dropped 4 points to Southampton Women and more recently Reading. And now it's kind of win or bust for them. I don't think there's any wiggle room. They have to win every game between now and the end of the season. And then hope for the best. Wickham have had a little wobble as well after a really strong start to the season. You've got Winchester Flyers there that are also competing, but they've got 2 games in hand on Wickham Wanderers. They've still got a few tricky games. I can't see Winchester City Flyers going unbeaten for the rest of the season, so I think they'll probably have to settle for second or third. But for where that club has come from, they were perennial sort of lower to mid-table over the recent years. So second or third would be fantastic. If you offered them that at the beginning of the season, they'd bite your hand off. I do think it will still be a straight shootout between Portchester and Wickham. Just looking at Portchester's outstanding fixtures, they do have Winchester City Flyers and they do have Wickham on the 19th. So that'll be this coming weekend, actually. So we will know more this time next week. But I would suggest that if we can win that game, I think that's them seeing out the division. But also Portchester, I think they've got enough about them as a club to retain those players, and it might just be a case of having to postpone or put the champagne back on ice for 12 months. But we've touched on it before. Tier 5's getting very, very good. Tier 5 is getting a trickle down from the National League from terms of coaches, resources, players, and it's very strong. I think you can see how they're starting to do well. Southampton women, they are starting to rebuild, and knowing the management team, like I do, I know that when they started off the season, they were never looking for promotion. They would love to be as close to the top as possible, but given everything that's happened to them with the relegation and how the club was sort of stripped bare from the players and having to rebuild from scratch, it is very much a consolidation year for them. And I think they've had a strong year, and they'll be looking to try and push that a little bit further. So it's getting ruthless. It'll be a ruthless summer for managers, where with players wanting to move left, right, centre. If you like transfers, then this is the level. This is the level for you. With regards to Southwest, that's always a tricky one, because whoever comes up is always going to struggle, because the catchment area is so difficult. When you compare it to if you're a club in the outskirts of London, there's just not as many players because it's a more rural area. Torquay, obviously, have got a little bit of experience within the National League, having been up here a couple of years ago. With Portishead going down, can Portishead hold on to their players and come straight back up, or will Portishead suffer a bit of an exodus? And will you have Torquay trying to go through and kind of pick up a few more experienced heads? I'd like a little trip to Torquay.
Absolutely that.
Actually, I wouldn't like a trip to. I would like a trip to Torquay from a sense of a club in and around, so potentially there. I don't want to be in our division next year, but we want to be promoted. But if not, then a little trip to Torquay. They're a nice club.
Fair enough, and you could always go there just for the giggles, if they get a weekend off. Yeah. So that's always nice.
We're all going to have a few weekends free now. Little post-season trip.
Right, let's get ourselves moved on, because the reason again why we started with where we are now at 25-26 is because these proposals that have been brought in at the moment, just a proposal, it's not ratified. This is by no means what is going to happen, but it is what is being suggested. It means that next season not a lot will happen. It will just go back to the way the world used to be. There'll be no playoffs. Everything will just be as if nothing ever happened. And then the season after, they decided, and I think quite reasonably, it's not the world's worst decision, we'd like to make the North and South League in Tier 3 a 14-team division. Excellent idea. Love it. So how are you going to fill that up? Said the people. And the answer came, great idea. Are you going to offer playoffs? Maybe fill it up in the same way that you're going to fill up the WSL too? No, don't be so silly. Why would we do such a thing? Instead, what they chose to do is, what we're going to do is we're going to pick 4 PGA clubs, whip them out of their PGA league that they're currently in, leave all the other ones, they're going to stay there, and we'll put them into Tier 3. Everybody else can just stay where they are. Why are you doing that? Well, we're going to pick them very, very specifically. And there's a quote here that I think is what we need to delve into first. They're picking the 4 teams. So it'll be 2 for the Northern League, 2 for the Southern League, based on the strength of their academy and their proportion of English talent. So it will be very much weighted onto how much English talent there is in their team. Now, it's an interesting sort of thing, and I come at this from a very neutral position.
Sorry, Barry, before we go any further, have they said that the PGA teams will be 2 from the north, 2 from the south?
Yes.
Okay, so that wasn't in Tom's, so that's something we know separately. Okay.
So the idea being, That's a train of thought there. Yes, so the
Sorry.
idea being, so it's fine. I come at this from a very neutral point of view, and that point of view is simply this. There are clubs at lower league level that will have a reserve side. Real Bedford have got a reserve side. They currently play in Tier 6 of the Eastern region. Hashtag United have got a reserve side. They currently play at Tier 6 of the Eastern region. Stevenage, who are in Tier 5, have got a reserve side who play in Tier 6. So it's not an unusual thing for these clubs to have these teams that play at a lower league level in order to try and get some proper senior football. And I think the issue that people seem to come at from this is that the answer to improving reserve team football isn't necessarily to stick them in the league. It's to fix the reserve leagues that we've currently got. But they're just not competitive. Like, it's almost like the American model. You can't really go up and down. There's not really anything to play for. So where's the competition? Some people talk about expanding the loan windows and making things a bit easier in that respect in order to get players to come down. So where I'm going to ask you this question is very simple. There's a lot of vitriol around it. Everybody's saying it. I mean, Claire's already thrown it in. It's a ridiculous idea. Maybe limit the amount of foreign players in the WSL. Maybe get rid of the PGA and make the WSL have reserve teams. There's all manner of ways to do it. It just feels a bit odd to just take 4 and say to the rest of them, well, nothing for you. Seems a bit odd to stick them in at Tier 3 as well immediately. And we're not going to get into what happens where they finish in the league just yet, because that's the second part of the discussion. I'm just interested, first of all, in whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea and why. Because, again, the whole purpose to try and give young English footballers the opportunity to play more competitive football so that they are more likely to get top flight minutes and appear for the country. So you can see there's a reason why they're coming out with it. There's a narrative. I suppose the question is, do you agree with it, Gareth?
No, in a word. But I think it's more nuanced than that. I think the way that this has been approached is, in order for women's football to be a success, and the reason for the booming popularity of women's football is because of the Lionesses. That's the kind of thought process behind this. And I think it's one that kind of rationale. It's difficult to disagree with that sentiment, right? The booming popularity came from the home Euros a couple of years ago. Now, was that because the Lionesses won it? Was it because it was a major tournament hosted in England that everyone could go and see? Was it some from column A, some from column B? Probably. So I think that, yes, I think it's fair to say that the massive booming popularity of women's football is in part down to the success of the Lionesses. Do we want to have a successful Lionesses side in order to continue to kind of push women's football forward? Yeah, I don't think that's an outrageous thing to want, to agree with any of that. Where I have issues is whose responsibility is it? Is it the responsibility of the National League to nurture this talent for WSL clubs? And that's where my personal opinion and clearly that of the league differ. I don't think it's responsibility of the FA Women's National League to nurture talent for the WSL. The Women's National League is a league in its own right, and it shouldn't become anything remotely like a feeder league to the WNL, which feels like this is a step towards. These proposals are watered down compared to the ones from last year, and it doesn't feel as extreme as them. I don't think there should be any PGA clubs in the pyramid, but then, like you say, there are reserve sides of other clubs, further down the pyramid as well. So yeah, at what point then do you become unable to have a reserve side in the pyramid? I think it's tricky. but I don't think it should be done that way. I think the routes to look at are going to be this year. The ADR registrations have been brand new. They've been a new thing piloted for this season, which is where you can be registered with a PGA club and a WNL club. They're not perfect. It can be really tricky as a club to be told, oh, this player is not available this week because they're playing for the PGA side. And then there's not really anything you can do with that, because the power still exists with the PGA, which it probably should. There needs to be something to develop players for first team football. I don't think that a PGA league properly develops players for adult senior football. I think the physicality is very different. If you are a 17-year-old winger going up against 17-year-old fullbacks or centre halves, it's going to be very different to if you're going up against a 29-year-old centre half as a 17-year-old winger, because the physicality levels they're just going to be different. So I understand why the league would want to do it. However, I don't think it is the responsibility of the National League to develop talent for the WSL. We'll kind of get on to the actual kind of structure of the league and stuff later on. I don't know what the solution is. I don't think that a limit on foreign nationals in the WSL is the way to go, because I think ultimately you just weaken the talent that is on show there. There are other leagues around Europe, men's leagues especially, that have a cap on foreign players, and they're just weaker leagues. I think if you want the WSL to be the best women's league in the world, you do that by having the best players play in the best league. And if you introduce a cap, that waters down the quality on show there. Can you do something where you designate that there has to be a certain number of young players in match day squads? Possibly, but then do you just end up with a position on the bench that never gets played every week and just is there to make up numbers? That's probably the way to go there. I don't quite know why we look at a side that has won back-to-back Euros, has reached a World Cup final in the last 3 major tournaments, and think this needs changing. That, I think, is my question. Why is it not working? What about it isn't working at the moment? I don't know, because I think if you look at England at the moment, they're one of the more successful countries in the world, and I don't quite know why anything needs to change.
Yeah, and just beat Spain on that one. Still going to bring you into the same conversation, but just another quote that that was mentioned. The league's presentations of clubs said that by bringing in these teams, it could enhance competitiveness, better prepare clubs for the WSL, and provide more compelling competition to attract fans and media to the league. Now, I don't want to sound elitist, because that's not what we're about on this channel at all. But you take a look at some of the the clubs. I picked the Southern on this one, but you've got Watford, a very well-known side, Plymouth, Bournemouth, Oxford United. But when you start looking at the teams like Lewis, Real Bedford, #United, Gwalior United, even Billericay Town, if you are a side, this is the 3rd tier of English football, and you're promoting that, all of a sudden, if you've now got some tweets being put in, and I don't know who the 4 teams are going to be, I'm just going to pull these completely out of my armpit, but let's just pretend it was City, United, Chelsea and Arsenal. Let's pretend it's them 4. If it was, and they start putting some tweets in, does that improve the profile of tier 3 to the point where more eyes may potentially rest on it?
To me, no. And I can tell you for why. There's a reason why. So Michelle Aguiman had a short loan spell at Watford. It was short because she was too good. What's too good? She was of high enough quality to be in and around the first team and get that loan move to Brighton. I've got a few views on if things have gone previously, but just focusing on that part of it. From what I've seen and read, and I'm talking about seeing with my own eyes, there are a lot of players in these PGA teams that are going to end up at best WSL2 or National League. If you're 17 to 18 and you're considered good enough, or you've got Sonia Bonpasteur aware of you, she's not sending you on loan to a National League team. Simple as that. For me, there's a huge, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and one of the consensus is that it's the arrogance of the Football Association and the arrogance of academies. I actually don't think that it's really being led by the National League Board. I think they are effectively being told from above what's looking to happen, and there is an arrogance from certain PGAs that don't think an environment in most National League teams is good enough for their girls. And it's as simple as that. And we are all three of us are involved in National League clubs with good coaches, a good setup. It might not be professional because we ain't got the dosh that a Premier League team has got, but it's a very good environment with very good coaches. And I'd argue that it's a very supportive environment as well. Yes, the things that we can't perhaps potentially offer, that's where dual registration and loans come in ultimately. It's unnecessary. It doesn't fix the National League youth system. All it does is it just gives a few more competitive games to players that are at the National League level. But if they're at National League level, they should be playing in the National League, because there's also a slight arrogance from the players as well. They've been mollycoddled to a large degree, and they think that they're too good for Moneyfields, or too good for Wythenshawe, or too good for Stevenage. Who's Stevenage? We want Premier League badge on our shirt. Yeah, but that's part of the problem. Not every player is like that, so I'm not casting aspersions for all, but the people that I've spoken to is that you tend to get a lot of PGA players tend to fall into two camps. Those that are willing to graft, want minutes, will listen and learn to everyone around them, and that they don't have the arrogance. They'll come down and play for a Halifax Town, an Ipswich Town, a Lewis, and we've had some from Moneyfields that have come from Southampton's PGA, and they're not going to be pushing into Southampton's starting 11 in WSL2. It's pure and simple. But there's no reason why they won't be pushing up to be a very competitive tier 3 player, and then maybe in 4 to 5 years they could be at a level where they could play WSL2, most likely, because, like I said, these girls are sort of 19. If they were being considered that they were WSL players, then they'd be at a WSL club right now. They wouldn't have been anywhere near us. At Moneyfields, we had a goalkeeper play a pre-season game with us from Tottenham. She was a 16-year-old goalkeeper, and I won't name her, but she was excellent. But she was so highly regarded that they were like, "Oh, actually, no, we want to keep hold of her." And I think in that scenario, it was the right decision, because this girl would just turned 16, was still in school, and actually she would benefit from being around the PGA environment. But if she's not pushing in, knocking on the door for a squad place, then actually she'd be better off playing competitive football. Southampton are one of the clubs closest to me, and I've seen a lot of their players. But you've got Lucia Kendall. She was playing National League football. She was playing regional county football. Then playing National League football, went up, and she's now up playing for England. So some of them can make that leap, but Premier League clubs were looking at her. Kayla Rendell is one of the goalkeeper from Southampton who's followed Saints as they came up through the divisions and worked their way up to WSL2. A youth international goalkeeper, someone that I think will have the quality to play in the WSL, but she's currently third choice at Manchester United. I'd be fascinated to have an off-the-record chat with her parents and her and find out. I'm sure that move will not be regretted at this point, but there will come a point, much like Sophie Bagley had, where it's like, actually, where do I want to play football? Okay, I want to play football for a competitive team. And actually, that's the trickle down that we need to see. We've touched on how good Tier 5 is getting because Tier 4 players are coming down. And actually, I think we would all agree that for the betterment of these players, just use the adequate loan system, much like Arsenal did with Aguiman. Okay, we'll put her in Tier 5. Okay, Tier 3. She's smashing it there. Actually, there's something. She's further in a development that maybe they realised, or it just confirmed a few things. So actually, we'll bring her in. We need to kind of like ramp up that development elsewhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's a fantastic use of it. That's how it should be done. But for every Aguiman, there'll be someone that will come down and be like, actually, that's kind of your level. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. What we need to do is make sure that teams at National League level can offer financial remuneration to these players, because I've kind of mentioned about the arrogance of PGA players. That's not necessarily a negative. That arrogance is because they back themselves and they want to have football as a career, and fair play to them. And that's how I want my daughter to be. That's how I think they should be. And obviously, maybe that's where they see the National Leagues a step down, because it's not necessarily a paid career move, and maybe they need to look. Obviously, through this talks about the investment and bringing in prize money, and maybe that needs to come in first, and then that can help the environment. Maybe they need to actually up the FA Cup money so that clubs can improve on resources and bring in, so that every club across the board, they all have a physio, they all have a full set of, like, we turn up at Moneyfields at some games and if all staff are available, we can turn up with 12 to 14 members of staff for a match, where another club might have 2, 3, 4 at most. And maybe with that extra investment, they can be the environment where they don't have to be so arrogant about it, actually, and they can kind of embrace the National League a little bit, because, as you touched on, it's not fixing the reserve league, it's just helping 4 clubs out that are probably going to be 4 relatively big names. Barry.
It does. It seems like a very weird way to do it, and it's almost like they're trying to force something through rather than thinking about what's actually best for the division, I think, really, and for the the league as a whole. I just think, from my point of view, I think it is a little bit frustrating that, like you said, you kind of want to have the infrastructure in place first. Like, this is why you said the loan system won't work as well, because WSL players are getting paid. Tier 3 don't necessarily have the money to shell out on doing those sorts of things. Tier 4, it's going to be a much reduced amount, you would think, than what they're getting at some of these bigger clubs. So, yeah, I think it's a tough one, but I think they've got a much better opportunity if they know that their player is going to get week in, week out football at a competitive level. And I love the way that you worded that, Stu. I think it's a really important point that actually it shows them the level they're at, which is beneficial for the team, beneficial for the player, beneficial for everyone, because there's no point really. And you mentioned Kayla Rendell. It's wild. It's wild to me. She's not been on the pitch. She's done absolutely nothing. When Fallon Tullis-Joyce was injured, it was Safi Middleton-Patel who went in goal. And that's understandable. She's a Welsh international, but all she does is sit on the bench. Is she gaining anything from that? Not really.
Well, probably behind the scenes. But and I would back any player, and I think that arrogance is good to be like, right, no, I'm going to back myself to do this. But there also needs to be that.
Nobody goes into football to sit on the bench all the time and watch. I mean, I would, but I'm a 44-year-old washed up has-been. Like, if you're a young player, I know I'm at Man United, that's great, but surely you want to be playing each week. That's the whole point. It's a short career.
Yeah, you're almost looking at sort of like Hannah Hampton's background or Clara Keating, and it's like, okay, and if she's not picking up appearances, and I think if Patel's fit, I think she's going to be getting those League Cup games. That's when I think Kayla Rendell is almost looking at a WSL2 to get the minutes, and that's where then Saints, and it's like, okay,
club, but a loan would definitely be the right thing to do. Yes, she's come from a WSL
or a move abroad. I really like what Rhea Bowes has done, and we've got Erica. It's Parkinson, isn't it? Who's over? Yeah, it's Parkinson. If I got the surname right, that's come from Sporting Lisbon into the England squad, and maybe that's something that some of these clubs should be looking at and actually try and take some of these players abroad so they can actually play. Because maybe there's an argument that maybe the top league in Portugal is akin to the WSL2, so maybe something like that is good. Maybe we're all Man United fans at heart, and we all remember Royal Antwerp and the feeder clubs that Man United used to send a lot of the class of '92 and that level of players to for experience. And maybe you need to put it as wide as that.
100%. So that's the PGA part of it done, but I think the bit that sounds brilliant and the bit that I really like is how they've started to rethink the league structure. And I think this is a really good idea in general. It does have a smidgen of not a good idea. We'll explain that in just a second. But for the most part, it's brilliant. So the idea would be that you have your 14 teams in the north, 14 teams in the south, as we said. Now, they'll play one whole round. So everybody will play each other once. And after 13 games, they stop and count the positions. Now, this bit I find a little bit tricky because it's 13 games. That means, and kids are going to love it now, some teams are going to have played 6 home games. Wow, I've leveled up. Some teams are going to play 6. Some teams are going to play 7 home games. So it seems a little bit unfair in that respect. But 13 games played, and at the end of it, they count it up. The top 4 teams and the top 4 teams from the south will break away and create a brand new division that will play off against each other, I presume, for a round of 14 games. And the top 2 will be promoted into the WSL2. Is that right, Gareth? Top 2? Can't hear what you're saying, mate. I'm trying to read your lips.
Sorry, how's fire mute? I think it might be one full round of fixtures, so another 7, so they play 20 in total, rather than another set of 14 fixtures, because that would be a big increase in the amount of games to try and get played. But yeah, the top 2 would then go up.
Fair enough. So yes, it's the top 2 that will go up. And then there'll be 2 separate divisions. The Northern Division will stay the same, so teams 5 to 14, and the same with the Southern League. They will be the same from 5 to 14, and they will play off against each other. And the bottom 3 teams in each of those, from 5th to 14th, will then be relegated into the Division 1 tiers, Division 1 league, sorry. And then, of course, from the Division 1 sides, we'll have the exact same situation as we're in this season. The top sides from each division will go up, and then the North and the Midlands will play off second place. South East and South West will play off second place, and that'll be the 6 teams that would replace the 6 that have come down. But the bit that's really stupid about this, and this is where I don't think we've got a fully formulated idea, is that what they said is, well, the PGA sides, they can be relegated, so we don't mind sending them into the Division 1 South East or the Division 1 North, which is obviously great for possible future England players to be thrown immediately into Tier 4. No problems with that whatsoever. But what we won't do, just to make sure they don't end up in the Championship, they can't finish in the top 4. So if they do, they won't be included. So presumably, if one of the teams finished 4th, the team that's 5th would go into the promotion league, and that poor little team that were 4th have now got to just carry on playing in the hope that they stay in a position that means they don't get relegated. So it's a great idea, but that's what I mean about the little smidgen that doesn't quite seem right. Gareth, when you hear how this league idea is coming up, it's a nice idea, but it just needs a little bit of work, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably the kind of skeleton of the way to go. I think that splitting off and forming some sort the split, I think, is a really good idea. I think it'll take a bit of getting used to. But ultimately, if you are a side that's trying to fight and prepare to go into tier 2, into the WSL2, then you're going to need to be able to play in a national league. And so kind of that sense of organisation, I think, is going to be good preparation for the two sides that end up doing it. I also think that promoting the best two teams, regardless of division, is a good way to go about it. You know, you could make an argument that, you know, over the last couple of years, the sides from the north that have been promoted into the WSL2 have been better sides than the sides from the south that have been promoted into the WSL2. I think if you look at it at the moment, you've got Ipswich and Pompey kind of towards the bottom end, whereas you've kind of got Newcastle and Forest comfortably mid-table. Obviously, you know, there is a sense of kind of money and things involved in that as well. But I think that split is probably a good way to go. I know Nick would prefer to see kind of an extra tier slotted in to make the National League cover tiers 3, 4, and 5, and in the regional leagues be tiers 6 and 7, which I think is just really, really tricky to do. Much more so than kind of making changes to this. Whether that's a much longer term prospect, potentially, it would be good to have, you know, a national third tier. But at the moment, I just can't see it happening. The sticking point for me is once you split and you've got your top 4 that are going off and they're fighting for promotion, and then you've kind of got your relegation league. If we were to look at Christmas at the teams that were 4th and break them off, you're looking at the likes of Stoke are 4th at the moment, so they've been in the National League. But then you're looking at you know, some other sides that have not really been troubled with relegation at all the way through the season. And so then what are they playing for? And prize money is something that the league have spoken about. And I think that's the way to go about it. There's that talk of, you know, £1 million of funding coming in, half of that being prize money, half of that being title sponsors. That would be something that teams would want to play for. You know, we're in a position now where, you know, we're probably not going to go and push on for the league, but we are in a position where we're going to challenge for 4th. And would that be kind of made all the more of a scrap for us in these next 3 games, if there was more money on the line for that? Yeah, absolutely. So I think that would make it, you know, much more competitive in that, you know, kind of relegation league for those sides that aren't really going to float with relegation. Listen, you know, that these discussions, it is still, you know, a purely discussional phase. There was a meeting yesterday where this was going to be discussed further. There are going to be more discussions happening about this with clubs, with the National League Board, with, you know, kind of all kinds of stakeholders in this. I don't think these proposals are going to be what comes in for 26, for 27, 28. I think, you know, there will be something that the league has agreed to. There'll be something that, you know, there'll be concessions that are made by clubs. There'll be concessions that are made by the league. I think Stu's probably right in that the PGA thing is probably being pushed by beyond the WNL board, and it's just something that they're kind of agreeing to. I think these as a set of proposals overall are much better than the previous ones. I'm just not sure on the PGA. But I think that would having a national split help clubs prepare for WSL2? Possibly. Would it make it more interesting for fans? Possibly. You know, I think, you know, fans can get really sick of playing the same sides over and over again, especially if you get, you know, if you draw a club in your division in the FA Cup, you're probably going to play them. You can play them twice in the league. You could end up playing them in the FA Cup. you could play them in the WNL Cup group stage or whatever. Wolves will have played Stoke in the WNL Cup group stage. They'll have played them twice in the league. You could also get drawn sides in the County Cup. I know Wolves will have played West Brom twice in the league. They'll have played them in the WNL Cup. Then I don't know if they're in the same County Cup as them. If they are, then that's, you could be playing the same sides 4 times in the league season. That's going to dry up and get boring pretty quickly. So I think this kind of fresh set of sides that you won't have played and won't play very much will make it more interesting for a fan. I think there are issues, I think, with how do you look at ticketing. That's one thing that needs to be ironed out. Like you say, you could play 6 or 7 home games in the first half of the season, and then you could end up playing, a different number of home and away games in the second half of the season as well. So it does make it tricky in that sense.
Gareth, can I just come in? Because I've more of a question for you than anything else, because you've probably done a little bit more on this than I have, but I'll be really interested to know how many of them can meet the National League's minimum standards. For example, Southampton play at Staplewood. Would they have to play their games at Staplewood? Would they then go somewhere else? A lot of the more local pitches have got teams that play on those, like Sholing from Tier 5. What are they going to do? They're going to boot one of these teams off the pitch because they're a bigger name. Have they got enough staff to man, like Moneyfields? Some of the staff we have to have, we've been up in our attendances to over 100. So we have to make sure that we've got at least 3 stewards. Presumably these clubs are just going to be, are they going to have paid people that are on the door every week? Is it just going to be any generic agency worker that's just going to stand there in a high vis and try and look interested? Is it people that are involved from the men's stewarding team? That's the question that I'd be interested to have.
Yeah, and the answer to that was, because it was raised, is the PGAs would have to meet the minimum standards of the National League, which I think would potentially reduce the interest from some of the PGA clubs, because if you're playing your home games at the training ground, for example, which I know a chunk of them probably do, are you going to want to have to then go and find a separate venue to play at? Because training grounds probably don't meet the requirements for fans, particularly. I think ground grading is tricky. You have to have a certain number of seats. You have to have a certain number of availabilities for fans to stand. You've got to have turnstiles. You've got to have toilets that are accessible for fans. And I think a lot of training grounds possibly don't have that. Some of them obviously will do, but that you're not going to have the required number of seats. For an example, I don't know if at Liverpool's training ground they have those facilities. So they're going to then have to find a separate venue to play them at. Yeah. And are they going to want to? I don't know. So yeah, there are lots of questions, which I think is why none of this is going to happen for the 26-27 season, which it does give it a year to iron things out. Because whilst there are positives, like you say, that is one thing that would really need to be ironed out.
It would also be good to see how they cope in the National League Cup, given for a prolonged period of time. Like, it might be that as the year, like in the next 2-3 years, actually they are really competitive within that competition, and you could have a few of them that occupy the sort of the semi-finals. Yeah, don't know. Like, I would go on about. I've got some points about the National League Reserve League, but maybe we'll sort of hold fire for them for another day, because that still needs to be looked at.
Is a very different question, and certainly a kettle of fish that I think definitely needs addressing somewhere. My last question goes to you, Stu, and it's based obviously around the same bit. But if they were, if let's just say, because I don't know what the positions were midway through the season off the top of my head, but if you took the top 4 teams from the north and the top 4 teams from the south, you would have Watford, Plymouth, Bournemouth and Oxford joining the division with Burnley, Wolves, Rugby Borough and Stoke. And I think what's really interesting about that is that obviously if it is only one round, as Gareth says there, it means that one team's going to have to travel a potentially long distance where the other side isn't. So Plymouth and Stoke, for example, isn't like the world's worst, but Plymouth and Burnley, that's a fairly long distance considering these are teams that would usually only be playing relatively regional football. Do you think that this long distance thing is good in terms of preparing them for potential of WSL2, which is obviously what they're fighting for? Do you think fans would follow to go and do such a thing? Because again, if it's regional, that they're probably likely to stick with it. If it's a long distance one, that's a very big commitment. It takes out a whole day, as we all well know. What do you think about it? So I like it. I'm excited about it. But again, is it too much too soon in that respect? I don't know.
I don't like it. I don't like the split. It's what you do in kids football. I don't like the split. I think what the league should be working towards is doing everything in their power, and maybe they might argue that this is, don't know. They should be doing everything in their power to make Tier 3 a one league, or one division national league. So you've got your WSL 1 division, WSL 2 1 division, Tier 3 is 1 division, and then you go regional at Tier 4 again. Because I think that.
But is that not an argument for the split? Because you think about a team like Halifax, they're not going to have the money to be.
What's the point? What's the point? What you want to do? The only reason that teams that then, let's say for example, if you shave the top 7 teams off the North and Southern Premier, most of those clubs have got a bit of backing, a bit of money behind them.
Mm-hmm.
They are probably in. I'd be interested for someone that actually works behind the scenes what they would say to it, but I imagine they're in very similar positions to what the Championship looked at maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Okay. So, and let's face it, we are a few years away for the WSL becomes pretty much a carbon copy of the Premier League. WSL2 will become a carbon copy of the Championship and vice versa. So if it means a club like Swindon or Norwich City, then think, oh, actually, do you know what? Fulham, great example. Fulham of doing really good things. Fulham are ready for WSL2 football. They will come in and they will compete at the top of Tier 3 because they're ready. They've got the name, they've got the badge, they've got the environment behind the scenes. They are growing organically, so they're not doing a Newcastle and just throwing money at it to do it quickly. And I think there are a lot of clubs in that position. I remember speaking to coaching staff at Bournemouth who said that I asked if they opened up the RTC licensing system, where would they be at? They said, oh, we would be ready within a week. All we've got to do is hire a few more coaches on a permanent basis, and they could reach that. So if they've got that available to them, then if there were more opportunities available to professionalize, because let's say hypothetically in my utopian single 16 to 18 team division, it's got TV coverage. Okay, oh, that's brilliant. It's just big names. Like if you're Ipswich Town, trying to get the local rag interested in a match with Billericay is probably a bit harder. But if they're playing against Wolverhampton Wanderers or Burnley or Stoke City, then it's all these names that we recognise. And I don't necessarily want it. I want to see Lewis's. I want to see London City Lionesses. I want to see the Real Bedfords and these more independent teams fighting with the big, or Moneyfields fighting with the big names. But yeah, I guess I'm probably going off on a big tangent, but I'm not a huge fan of the split. I just want the leagues to be bigger and have more games. I think there is an issue with the Super League that there have not been enough games. It's good that Tom Gary has finally touched on something with regards to the WSL2 recently. There are not enough games. I know a lot of Pompey fans who actually would welcome relegation because they get fed up of going 3 weeks without games and not being able a chance to go and see the players that they love. And I don't think there's enough games in the National League. Maybe there's slightly more with all the cup competitions available, but yeah, I still think there's scope for more teams of that division. Moneyfields, we obviously align with our men's team. Our men's team are playing a 30-team division, and they travel midweek. It's not that they travel midweek for 2-3 hours at times. A game like we would have against Bridgewater, 2-3 hour drive, they'll have during the week. So are we stunting the growth by not saying, oh, okay, you can't do it? We can't do it as a women's team because we haven't got the money in it. But start feeding that money in and start giving us the resources. Then actually, maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, that's easily achievable. Not right now. I get it. That it's not, but that's what they should be aspiring to have ultimately. Regional is for amateur, and we want the National League to be as close to professionalised as it can be as soon as possible. And I mean, we're talking a long way down the line, but players need paid.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the way long-term forward is with a fully national tier 3, but I think if this is a step towards that, then I think it's better to have this than it is to have 2 completely regionalised tier 3s. Would I want it kind of permanently? Probably not. But if it's a kind of sense of, oh, look, this is something that we can do, and then the long-term plan in 5 years' time is to go fully national at that level, then that's great. Because
if I can come in very quickly. I get the excitement about playing different teams. That's good, but maybe the argument is actually that let's get the National League Cup. Let's not regionalise that. If it's now moved to weekends, let's increase that. Ultimately, if the Champions League can manage a draw where you can't play that team from your country or that team that finished there, I'm sure there's an algorithm that can work out a team a team that Moneyfields can face that's not too far north, but in the northern area. So completely open up, or let's not regionalise the FA Cup. Let's put a bit more money in that, so it makes travel a little bit easier. Ultimately, we're staying overnight. We stayed overnight when we played Plymouth the other day, but do you know what? If we had to, we'd have driven down there in the morning.
It's an interesting one. I mean, you talk about not enough games. I mean, as I said, Stevenage in Tier 5, we've obviously had a full league season. We've had the County Cup, League Cup, and the FA Cup. We went out in the first round proper to Norwich, and that will mean that by the end of this season, we'll have played 34 games. Some teams won't make it very far in any of those cup competitions because they've only got one opportunity in each competition, so they could be finishing their season on 25. So there's a 9-game discrepancy just at Tier 5 level. But I completely agree with you. I've always said that there should be more football. That's what maintains the interest. I think when you essentially have to go a month without football, the fact there's never anything over the festive period, I understand there being a winter break in some respects. It's a different game, but it frustrates me that, the men are on, but I'm not interested in watching Man United men, like you just said, because I'd rather watch the wall dry after I painted it. It's not that exciting. But if maybe
women's football is missing a trick, and maybe the argument is that you only need to, depending on where Christmas Day falls, you only need to block out that little weekend there. You don't need, I know that the National League kept, I think it was the Sunday the 20th or 21st. They basically said there's nothing scheduled, but you need to be prepared that we may schedule something in. Well, actually, schedule something in. School's on holiday then. As someone that works behind the scenes trying to promote matches and build a fan base, I would love to have something like that in. And especially if it's a local derby or something like that. And it just needs to be more games. It's not unreasonable to ask for 4 more football games. We've all got a completely free game week this week, pretty much. There's hardly any football, just because they've kept it free for a mop-up.
I'm getting at there, because when you talk about this new model, they're moving to 14 teams, but if you are in that promotion league, then it sounds like you've only played 20 games, which means ironically you're playing way less. Whereas the teams that are in the relegation bit will have played 13, and then, of course, they've still got to play another 9 games. They'll have played 22. So the teams in the bottom bit have ended up playing more games than the teams that are trying to get promoted, which it feels just backside about face, really, doesn't it? You kind of you want more teams in the promotion league, so put 5 or 6 teams from each division into that one. So, but I think, like Gareth says, it's still being sorted. So they might
what?
To that conclusion.
For me, it's like trying to write a Hollywood blockbuster because you know the ending, and you're trying to work back and justify it, and that's where the struggle is. And actually start from the beginning and go through it logically, so you can come to a sound ending that everyone wants.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So there we go. The last thing, obviously not a question, but just to point on what Stuart said, which was, of course, there is going to be more money coming in. The FA are going to invest £500,000 towards prize money, and then it says they're going to put another £500,000 in, which they hope will be raised through a title sponsorship of the league. So, Gareth, this is literally just a 30-second answer. Do you think that means that that's £500,000 that the FA are going to give no matter what, regardless whether it gets a title sponsorship, or that we only get the £500,000 if somebody puts in the sponsorship? Because I struggle to understand that second bit.
My understanding is there is £500,000 ring fenced as prize money, which will be distributed. However, I don't think they've quite figured that out yet. And then £500,000 if they get a title sponsor that will not be prize money, but will be through grants and kind of funding, probably towards minimum standards and coaching and that kind
Brilliant.
of thing. I think they're 2 separate pots of money, but when writing about it, £1 million sounds like a lot of money, and 500,000 seems like a lot because it is a lot smaller amount of money. So I think the two are just being put together to make £1 million seem really big, when one is going to be prize money and for probably positions in the league, one would assume, and one will be a pot of money that people can apply for and get funding, probably to help with minimum standards. So it might be for ground upgrades, might be for coaching qualifications, might be for physios or S&C coaches, all that kind of stuff.
Brilliant. That's what it needs. I remember doing a poll on Since 71 a couple of years ago, and it was mainly directed at players. And I said that, would you rather, if this sort of investment came in, that it just lined your pockets and you get paid as a semi-pro or pro, or would you rather that it went into facilities behind the scenes? And it was a unanimous that players wanted the exact things that you discussed. If it means that a club can have a physio that's there for every single training session, fantastic. That's kind of what should kind of that. Yeah, that's the difference. That's what makes it a more appealing environment for a PGA player to drop down into.
Just very quickly, Barry, because I know we've gone on for ages. I think the thing with paying players and the money for that at the moment is lots of these players have very good jobs already, and the money that clubs are going to be able to afford to give them is not going to be anywhere near what they're already currently earning from their jobs. And so unless you're going to be able to put in bucket loads of money, it's always going to be a side thing for them. And so having that kind of enjoyable thing at the side you can earn a bit of money from, but ultimately the facilities and the enjoyment and the development and the growth from all of that, I think is always going to be much more attractive than we can give you an extra 100 or 200 quid a week, because ultimately, yeah, sure, that's great, but lots of them have great jobs. Lots of them are teachers, for example, and yeah, sure, an extra 400 quid a month is going to be fantastic, but having an S&C coach and a physio and better training facilities is going to be more impressive than that.
No, for sure. I think I agree with that. We'll just finish with what Claire's been saying, which, of course, that Carol West, who is a former chairperson, I believe, of the WNL. So she's making some great points, so do feel free to search her up on X and find some information there. She mentioned as well about seeing Newcastle announcing the losses of 3.25 million is worrying. But I suppose when you've got the owners that Newcastle have got, it's a bit like losing 50p down the edge of the sofa, really, isn't it? So
exactly. Just very, very briefly on that. I actually think in a way that's a good thing. I've long argued that if these clubs can afford it, they should be doing that, because what they've done is they are building the fan base. I always liken it to you've got a very successful restaurant. You want to open up another restaurant. You want it to be as equally successful, but it's probably not going to be making as much money for the beginning. Might be making a loss for a while, but if you put equal resources into both, you could have two good restaurants, and then that's what Newcastle are doing. There's an issue about where the money's come from, but actually they're doing what they should do, because actually, if the league and everything around women's football are doing its thing properly, then actually that gap should lessen, even if they just remain static in WSL2 for a little while, because they get more money from the fan base because they're invested, got better players, and they're doing well. But yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing in the long run.
No, not at all.
No, those books will get a balance going. If it was Durham losing 3.2 million, then that's a much bigger concern. But Newcastle can just, it'd be like me sending Barry a tenner now on my banking app, wouldn't it? Oh, look, that's that debt cleared, sorted.
Absolutely. Feel free to do that, Gareth. No problems whatsoever. And the last thing there, maybe it would help towards player insurance. Now, I just did a little bit of counting. So the way I see it, if there's two lots of 14 teams, that's 28 teams. And then there'd be 48 teams in the Division 1s. So that would be 76 teams. And if you were to divide £500,000 between 76 teams, it comes out, not that they will do it this way necessarily, but it would come to £6,578.95 if you round it up. So whether or not that will bring everything that everybody wanted, I'm not so sure. If you chose not to give anything to the PGA clubs because they've got enough money as it is, that would make it £6,944.
Or just general means testing. Just general means testing. If if you're Newcastle prior to being promoted, or you're Fulham, that's probably not even. You've probably paid that to an agent for a 10-minute phone call.
Quite possibly. So there we go. So 500,000 does seem like a lot, but when you put it amongst all of the sides in the WNL, it's not bad, but it's not necessarily going to cover everything. But there we go. Listen, we've done the debate. We've done everything we need to do. We know whereabouts we are. People should be ready for the next 2 weeks. It's going to be huge. And they should also be ready for the next 2 years, when we should be working out what is going to happen to the WNL. But until then, my thanks to you, Stu, for jumping on and giving us your wisdom, and the same for you as well there, Gareth. Much appreciated. Thank you, Claire, I suppose, really, in the chat, as the only person that was putting any messages in, but thank you very much to the rest of you that have jumped on and watched for however long. Much appreciated to have you with us. We will hopefully be back next week. We will look forward to seeing you then. There should hopefully be a Monday show as well. But until then, take care of yourself, be safe, enjoy watching England once again after that fantastic win against Spain, and we will see you next time. Good night all.